by the way, if I'm saying that and it bothers you, I wonder why it would bother you. Is it because you're not making the most of the things that they've provided for you? Do you realize inside of yourself that your parents have worked way too damn hard for you to just settle into being absolutely mediocre or less? And if so, that's probably a conversation for you to have with yourself. I think about it, like my parents sacrificed way too much for me to be mediocre. Actually, a lot of people, we just settle right into that mediocrity. It's like we're not going to try a little bit harder, but we don't want to do just enough so that we don't get yelled at, and that's like a way of life for people. And a lot of folks just don't grow out of that. Like I've worked at jobs where people show up and they do just enough not to get yelled at, just enough not to get fired, just enough not to get complaints against them. And that's what their life becomes. It's just this, or it's just that. And if you make up enough of your days that way, then your life is just a thing that existed for a little while and then vanishes and leaves nothing useful behind. That they had then get poured into the kid, and so that kind of like robs the kid of their childhood because they felt like they were robbed of their dreams. But there's almost like there can be like this deep animosity that forms there, because it's like they blame the kid for it. Of course, the kid had nothing to do with it. The kid didn't choose to be conceived. It was the parents who did that. And then sometimes it really is like, and that's like a negative way of seeing it. Sometimes it really is for the best. Like for example, I don't know if any of you are like this, but like your parents, maybe they didn't go to college. And so they push you to be the first. And maybe you don't want to go to college. Maybe you want to, do construction or something, but they're pushing you into this. I had a student year before last now, so she's still here. Some of you might even know who she is. She was telling me that her parents dropped out of school. I think she said when they were like 7th grade or 8th grade. I think her mom dropped out in 7th. I'm sorry, her dad dropped out in 7th. Her mom dropped out in 8th. They were from Mexico. They came here, worked their asses off, and they've done pretty well now. So they've saved up some money, and I want to say they have a business or something like that. But the point is that they have a good amount of money right now. So what that means is that she has done everything. She came home as a little girl and she was like, I want to do gymnastics. So her parents were like, okay, gymnastics it is. And then she didn't want to do gymnastics anymore. She wanted to play softball. So they went out and they bought her all the softball equipment, put her onto a team in a league. So she wanted to swim, so they got her all that stuff, got her swimming lessons. Everything she's ever wanted to try, she's tried. And she was saying in class that she's even a little bit nervous about telling her parents now, like, I want to try this one thing, because now it's not just that her parents will give her the opportunity, now they actually push her into it. And they tell her, now you have to go and do this because you said you wanted to try it, so now you have to try it. And in that case there, we might look at that and say, oh, that's a pretty cool thing though, because she gets to try all these things. Well, where does that come from? Well, her parents not really having much of a childhood, and so they work it through her in that way, which is mostly positive. I mean, that's a much better problem to have than the first one I was saying. You go in the ring and get your face punched in when you're 8 years old. It's better to end up on a swim team or to try horseback riding. She wanted to try after doing horseback riding. And so both of those come from the unlived life, but also the general unlived life. Like if you have, I know people who get to be, they have children when they're very young, and then as they get, even like not even super old, like into like their 30s or so, they try to act like they're in their, they try to act like they're in their teens. Like I'm thinking of a friend of mine who, she graduated from high school. I knew her when I lived in Los Angeles. I didn't know her when she was in high school, but I knew her afterwards. She graduated from high school and she had a full ride to Hawaii State and to Pepperdine. Pepperdine's a private college, really expensive. And she had a boyfriend at the time who dropped out of high school. And he said, I have a better idea. Let's have a baby. So she's like, okay. So rather than going to college, they had a baby. And when I knew her, she was like in her late 20s, I think it was, and she already had four babies, 4 children with him. And he did okay. He worked at In-N-Out as a manager, and managers make a good amount of money over there. But then she and he split up. I think she was like 30, and then she got into her early 30s, and she started going out and like clubbing and stuff when she was in her 30s. Like, yeah, you're a mom of 4, and you're in your 30s, and you're out there acting like you're 21, 22. And why? Because she feels like she lost something. She feels like she missed out on something by that unlived life. And I haven't talked to her since I moved out of LA. It's been a very long time, 16 years. I can only think about where she would be right now. So she's gonna be in her 40s now, and I wonder if she ever grew out of that, or if something kind of kept her in that. But if she hasn't, or even if she has, I suppose, the way that she's trying to relive that unlived life now is naturally going to affect her children, because that's the mom that they have. And so because that's their mom, then they have to live with whatever kind of comes with all of that. And so 3 or 4 very distinct ways of being able to understand this. But one of the things that both of my classes didn't talk about was this idea about the environment. So yeah, about the environment, the things that are around us, you know. There was a guy who used to teach here. Actually, I'm sorry, he didn't really teach here. He coached baseball and he ran the learning center. His name was Andy Sanchez. If any of you guys have like family and friends or whatever who came here years ago, and you mentioned Andy Sanchez, they'd probably know who he was. He's a really neat guy. Very energetic, always seemed to be happy, but you kind of tell something underneath there. He was a smaller guy. He's only about like 5'6" or so, but he held the CIF touchdown record for football until Reggie Bush broke it. And if you know anything about football, then you know who Reggie Bush is. But he's a smaller guy, and he held the record for like 20 years, like the most number of touchdowns ever scored in a career. He played. He was drafted to play baseball by the Kansas City Royals, and he wanted to play football, but he didn't get drafted well, obviously he went to college, played football, and then when he got out, he couldn't get drafted because he was just a smaller guy. So he went and played football in the Canadian football leagues. If you go over to Balboa Park, they have the Hall of Champions. You'll see pictures of him. They have all of his records up there. His records are just like, pages of all the records that he set. And he was telling me that when he moved into his house, his wife built, specifically that had a room that she surprised him by building a trophy room with all of his awards and trophies and everything. And he said that he took it down. He said, I appreciate it, but he took everything down because he had a son. And he was worried that his son would grow up seeing all of those trophies and all those awards and thinking, I have to live up to that? Like, that was my dad, I gotta live up to that? Like, imagine being Elon Musk's kids and living up to that. Or just, famous actors. There's a balance there. Like, there's some people that just like shock me. I'm not shockable anymore, but I sit there and shake my head because unfortunately, doing this long enough, you can see the directions that like people kind of stream into, And I just think like, my God, like, what else say it? Like, my God, like, I don't know, do your parents look at you and are they really proud of you? Like, if you really give them a reason to, like, I see some folks here, and I'm like, imagine like being your parent. My God, like all the sacrifices you made, you really feel like wow, we had to go without things so I could raise this. Are you really? And by the way, if I'm saying that and it bothers you, I wonder why it would bother you. Is it because you're not making the most of the things that they've provided for you? Do you realize inside of yourself that your parents have worked way too damn hard for you to just settle into being absolutely mediocre or less? And if so, that's probably a conversation for you to have with yourself. I think about it, like my parents sacrificed way too much for me to be mediocre. But for something, some people, like a lot of people, we just settle right into that mediocrity. It's like we're not gonna try a little bit harder, but we don't want to do just enough so that we don't get yelled at, and that's like a way of life for people. And a lot of folks just don't grow out of that. Like I've worked at jobs where people show up and they do just enough not to get yelled at, just enough not to get fired, just enough not to get complaints against them. And that's what their life becomes. It's just this, or it's just that. And if you make up enough of your days that way, then your life is just a thing that existed for a little while and then vanishes and leaves nothing useful behind. And you can see in some cases what it produces. And it's good to have stuff like that around because it reminds you what you could slip into or what you could look like to other people who do work really hard. But it's a good question to ask yourself at some point, maybe many points throughout your week or throughout your year. My parents have sacrificed a bunch for me to be doing whatever it is I'm doing. Am I honoring that sacrifice? And I get it. Sometimes I think, well, my parents suck. Maybe, but you're still here. You still got food. You still got clothing. You still got a phone. You still got stuff. You still got a life of some kind, even if it's not the ideal one. But even if it isn't a matter of that, hopefully you can find the motivation inside of yourself to say, well, I am where I am. So let me make the most of where I am. Even if you can't fall back on it and say, well, plus my parents have sacrificed a bunch for me to be here, so let me also honor that. But, and by the way, given especially since most of y'all will be parents at some point, it's worth asking yourself. If you had a child, you had a son, you had a daughter, and they were you, would you look at them and say, good, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of this person that I've built up. Or would you look at it and go, man, I wouldn't want them to know who I really am. And that's good. This isn't a way of saying like you should feel crappy about yourself. It's a way of saying it's a good way to measure yourself. Because if you wouldn't be proud of your own kid being like that, then you can't possibly be proud of yourself. And if you're not proud of yourself, it's difficult to make anything of yourself because you aren't going to feel like you deserve anything. So the first thing is first, treat yourself like somebody that you care about, because maybe we should care more about ourselves. I don't mean like you should love yourself no matter what. No, you gotta, of course, have reasons to. I can't come in here and tell you, hey, be happy. So if I came here and said, hey guys, laugh, okay? And I force you to laugh, you'd probably be, it wouldn't be a real laugh. You have to give a person a reason to laugh. You have to give a person a reason to be happy. And similarly, we have to give ourselves reasons to be proud of what we are, so that we can see what we actually deserve and then reach for that thing, that better thing that we actually deserve. Questions? Comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Almost a happy Wednesday.